Do you really think anyone here is going to listen to you? The officer's voice was thick with scorn, cutting through the heavy atmosphere of the station like a razor. The woman remained calm, standing tall despite the anger rising inside her. She was there to report a stolen wallet, but the officer's hostility was unprovoked. "Excuse me," she replied, her voice even but strong, holding on to her dignity, though it was being chipped away with every passing second. The officer sneered, his lips curling with mockery, before grabbing his coffee cup and tossing its contents across the desk in a swift, practiced motion. Hot liquid splashed against her face, stinging her skin, but it wasn't the pain that shook her. It was the cold indifference in his eyes. Gasps filled the room as a few witnesses watched, some frozen in surprise, others choosing silence over intervention. "That's a reminder of your place," he sneered, his tone a dangerous mix of power and disdain. She flinched, stepping back slightly, her heart racing. The sting of the burn was sharp, but the shock of the officer's blatant cruelty sent a rush of adrenaline through her. She could feel the weight of the moment, but she refused to let it break her. Not now, not when so much was on the line. The officer leaned back in his chair, self-satisfied, oblivious to the truth standing right before him. He hadn't just insulted any ordinary citizen. He had made a grave mistake. For weeks, there had been whispers in the station about a new head of the department, someone who would change everything. No one knew who it was, but rumors painted this person as someone who would challenge the old ways. No one, however, expected that person to be a woman, especially not someone like the one standing in front of him, drenched in coffee, with a fire in her eyes. In his arrogance, the officer had humiliated his future superior, someone whose position in the department would soon make his own look insignificant. But why had she walked into the precinct today without revealing her identity? What had driven the officer to lash out with such unnecessary venom? And what would happen next? As time passed, an uneasy tension began to settle over the room. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation. The woman, still composed, walked silently to the back offices, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, an unspoken promise of retribution that sent a chill through the room. Whatever was coming next, no one in the precinct was prepared for it. Things began to change when a high-ranking official walked into the precinct, a presence that immediately shifted the atmosphere. He locked eyes with the woman, giving her a respectful nod, the kind of reverence that sent a ripple of confusion through the room. Whispers filled the space. Who was she? Why was she receiving this treatment from someone so important? As the truth slowly began to emerge, the officer's cocky demeanor started to unravel, piece by piece. What followed was a series of events that rocked the precinct to its core. By the time everything came to light, even those who had once supported the officer found themselves re-evaluating their choices. The balance of power shifted, and it was clear that justice had arrived, in a form none had anticipated. This story wasn't just about one officer's cruelty or a woman's unshakable will. It was about the fractures in a broken system, the courage to confront the status quo, and the heavy price of underestimating the wrong person. What drove the officer to act with such venom? And what consequences would he face for his actions? Stay with us as we uncover a story of humiliation, resilience, and a reckoning that would leave even the strongest speechless. In the heart of a bustling city, where the streets hummed with ambition and the air buzzed with quiet determination, Naomi Rivers stood as a symbol of unyielding strength. Naomi, a tall woman in her late 30s with a presence that commanded attention, had long since learned how to stand firm against the challenges life threw at her. Her skin, a warm, rich brown, gleamed beneath the streetlights, while her eyes, a sharp blend of warmth and wisdom, reflected her resolve. Naomi wasn't just a woman who had ascended to a position of power in the police force. She was a survivor of systemic oppression, of struggles faced by countless people of color, especially women. She had grown up in the heart of Westbridge, a neighborhood where dreams and hardships often clashed. Raised by her grandmother, Gloria, a passionate civil rights activist, Naomi had learned from an early age that fighting for justice wasn't optional. It was essential. Gloria's words echoed in Naomi's heart daily. You don't wait for respect, Naomi. You demand it. Fight for it. And even then, some will refuse to see you. Fueled by those lessons, Naomi had spent her entire career navigating a world designed to exclude her. She studied tirelessly, worked longer hours than anyone, and faced down challenges with a poise that made her impossible to ignore. Her rise to the position of chief wasn't a stroke of luck. It was the result of years of proving herself, often in the face of prejudice and resistance. But when Naomi was finally offered the chance to lead, it wasn't just about the position. It was about changing a broken system from within, even if it meant facing down every obstacle and every person that stood in her way. Naomi wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for a community that had been ignored for far too long. The title of chief was a tool, not an end in itself. Her mission was far greater than the badge she wore. Meanwhile, in the precinct Naomi was about to take over, Officer Charles Grant embodied the complacency and entitlement Naomi had fought against her entire career. In his early 40s, Charles had climbed the ranks not through hard work, but through personal connections and favoritism. He was the type of officer who saw his badge as a license to dominate, rather than serve. With his clean-cut appearance and arrogant demeanor, he'd long believed that no one could touch him. Charles had a reputation, a mix of minor commendations and major complaints, all of which were often ignored by his superiors. He used his position to intimidate others, bending situations to his will. To him, respect wasn't earned, it was taken by force. His disdain for anyone who challenged him was well known, especially when it came to people of color, whom he treated with barely veiled contempt. Respect for the police, in his mind, was something to be demanded, not earned. The precinct, located in the heart of the city, was a place where tension constantly lingered in the air. Its halls were a mix of old and new, patches of history, unsung heroes, and a culture that had slowly turned toxic. Naomi knew that if she was going to reform this place, she would need to see it firsthand. One day, she walked in, blending in with the crowd, dressed in plain clothes. She wanted to see the true face of her future department. She knew that how people acted when they thought no one important was watching was a truer reflection of their character. As Naomi approached the front desk, she was met by Charles, lounging in his chair, completely indifferent to the person standing in front of him. When she asked for assistance, his response was dismissive. "What is it?" he muttered without looking up. "I need to report a theft," Naomi replied, her voice calm and unwavering. Charles rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, "Figures." Naomi didn't flinch. "Excuse me? Another purse snatched? Or did you lose a phone?" He sneered. "You people always think we're here to babysit." Her jaw tightened, but she held her composure. "I'd like to file a report." Charles leaned forward, his smirk turning into something darker. "I'd like you to stay in your lane. But we don't always get what we want, do we?" Before Naomi could respond, he grabbed his coffee mug and, with a smirk, threw the steaming contents toward her. As she turned her head to avoid the worst of it, some of the coffee splashed across her face. The heat stung, but the real burn came from the humiliation he had so casually inflicted. The room went silent. Naomi stood there, unbroken, her face wiped clean of the coffee. "Nice try," she said, her voice calm but fierce. "But you've just made your last mistake." Without another word, she walked toward the back office, knowing full well that she had just begun a new chapter. A chapter where she was the one they would soon be answering to.